Hello and welcome to another episode of Finders Keepers, the podcast that helps you find the best keepers for your keeper and dynasty leagues. I'm your host Jordox, and round 20 of the AFL season was, for the most part, completely one-way traffic in every game. Pretty much every game was essentially a blowout, until of course the final game of the round, which saw a finish of the likes we have never seen before in our game. Not only did St Kilda pull back the greatest three-quarter time margin in history, 46 points, but they won it with 2 goals in quick succession, thanks to a 666 infringement paid against Melbourne. It was simply extraordinary. And if you didn't see it or there weren't cameras there to capture it, you would never have believed it happened the way it did. I just love that this game never runs out of ways to entertain us. But from a fantasy perspective, with so many one-sided games, we did have a lot of big scores. It was quite a high-scoring round. And much like last week, we had a heap of ceiling scores, including 14 over 120 and 8 scores over 130. On Finders Keepers this week, I'll run through what I noticed across the round, look at my waiver wire picks for the week, and then have a look at a bunch of trades that have gone through in one of my keeper leagues in the last week. Stay tuned as well, because there is a spot opening up in that league, and if playing in a keeper with me is something that interests you, well, keep listening to find out a little bit more later on. So, on to what I noticed in round 20, and it started on Thursday night with Hawthorn and Carlton. And the Hawks looked really good in this game, had an easy win. And I'm not sure if it's more about how Carlton are going at the minute, but I don't know, Hawks looked really hot in this game. Like they're starting to get their game together in time for finals. And a big part of that is James Sicily. He's starting to look back to his fantasy-friendly ways again with a 110. Intercepting, keeping his cool, not giving away silly free kicks, and racking up the pill, which is what Sicily owners have always liked, but it's been a bit of a frustrating season for him. Up forward, I think there's some exciting times coming up for Hawks fans. Kausha Deer and Mitch Lewis, who haven't played, and they've both been injured and had a number of issues there with getting their bodies right. But I tell you what, seeing these two play together and the way they played, it almost transforms what Hawthorn looked like in terms of the threat going forward. Deere scored 74, Lewis scored 76. They both kicked 2 goals each. They didn't necessarily tear the game apart, but there was some big contested marks. And I don't know, I thought it was a really big game from both of them, and just a sign of things to come. For Carlton, well, it was the farewell game for an absolute champion of the sport and a champion of the fantasy world too, Sam Docherty. And he scored a 75, played on the wing and played up forward and got a nice farewell goal, which I thought was pretty fitting. Harry O'Farrell is a key defender who was in his 5th game and took 13 marks and scored 103. One out of the box, probably, but anyone that can score a fantasy ton in their 5th game is worth just keeping an eye on down the track, because 13 marks is quite impressive. Another young fella, Will White, scored 82, and he's been generally a small forward for the Blues and not scored anything like that. But in this game, he saw some time up on the wing and looked really good, I thought. And I reckon with the way Carlton season has been and will be for the last month, they just need to throw games into these kids. So I think we'll see the likes of O'Farrell and White get opportunities in the run home. Friday night we had the double header, which was a bit of a head scratcher, but a lot's been said about the fixturing, so I'm not going to go on about that. Essendon Bulldogs kicked it off, and Andy McGrath, he's had some time at centre bounces the last couple of weeks, and this game was the same. And I only really bring it up because he's someone that I've thought should be better or more consistent in fantasy, and maybe a midfield role will help, but he wasn't really too involved. He scored 70, and I mean the Bombers barely got much in the way of the fantasy scoring. It was just a Bulldogs, they thrashed them. Jordan Ridley went off injured on 33. And as an owner in both of my keepers, it's just so disappointing because I feel like I'm the only person who hasn't given up on Ridley being a really good player. But these injuries, they just keep happening, and it's getting harder and harder to carry this guy. I don't think the scans, I haven't heard anything yet, but it's a hamstring strain, they believe, and with 4 games to go, you'd think it would be the end of his season. For the Bulldogs, it was a big night for them. Aaron Norton and Sam Darcy had absolute field day together. And, Norton's been really good. He scored 111 from a big bag of goals, but his 5-week average is 97 now. And we've just seen a bit of consistency from him, probably for the first time that I can remember. And he's getting closer to being someone I trust in my forward line. So hopefully he and Darcy can keep this partnership going the way it's going, and they both are quite involved. And Norton owners will be pretty happy into the future with him. Bontempelli, just another whopper of a 146. He had 60-something in the last quarter. I mean, he's just putting up some ridiculous numbers at the moment. And then the last one was Jed Buslinger, who I thought was pretty stiff to have not seen more senior games this year. I thought he looked okay when they gave him a crack, and then I think he was the sub or something. And anyway, glad to see him back in. He had a big game in the twos, got his spot back, and look, he scored 63, and I just think he's a sort of guy that could be a fantasy-friendly key defender. I just think he likes the ball in his hands. He likes to take it on, and I'm looking forward to seeing him develop. Hopefully he keeps his spot for the rest of the season. The other Friday night game was the Giants and the Swans in the Battle of the Bridge, and that third quarter from GWS was mesmerising. They put on a clinic to come from behind and, just about end the Swans season. Finn Callaghan won the medal for best of ground, best on field. And it was a big third quarter that he had that really helped the Giants turn things around. But I just thought it was pretty impressive because he was tagged by Jordan for most of the game. Put up a 95, best on ground. He's really had a great year, Callaghan. Steve Coniglio, second game back, scored 79, playing midfield. I think for someone with forward status, if you grabbed him or you still have him, I think you can be fairly optimistic on what sort of scores he'll put up for the next few weeks. I do think he'll be playing midfield predominantly. Joe Fonte. Now, Fonte scored 46, so I just want you to ignore what he's scoring at the minute because he's not scoring big numbers. But watch this kid play. If you happen to watch the Giants play, really focus on Fonte. I'm telling you now, he's going to be a star in the future. There's just something about him. He plays with the way he takes on the opposition and tries to get around them and create the play and just keep the ball moving. If you're in a deep league and you can get your hands on him and stash him, I think he's going to be one we talk about in the years to come. And then, look, the only thing for the Swans was Brodie Grundy. Just yet another huge ton. That's a 130 he put up against Briggs, and that's now 11 tons in a row, averaging 125 in that time. Just outstanding. Saturday we had the Q clash between Gold Coast and Brisbane, and of all the one-sided games this weekend, this was the biggest surprise. I thought Gold Coast could beat them, should beat them, but they smashed them and dominated the fantasy scores. They had 9 tons, the Suns. And the one I want to talk about first is Alex Davies, who put up a 111 in his first senior game of the season. Big centre bounce numbers for a guy that's been in the VFL all season. I think he's a fourth or fifth year player who's had, I guess he's had opportunities here and there, but for a very long time he's just been a name of someone to keep an eye on if he ever starts playing and finds his way. And I'm not sure why he's been held back this season when the Suns have kind of needed an extra body in that midfield. But he scored very well in this game. They won handsomely. I think he's going to get a run now. The whole Gold Coast midfield dominated, though. So, you got Matt Rao with a 145, who is just keeps doing it, even though I keep saying it can't continue because it's based on tackles. But he's racking up the pill. He's tackling like a maniac, and he's just scoring tons for fun. And then you got Fiorini, who's had a great 6-7 weeks. He gets a little bit of time in the middle. He scored 126. Bailey Humphrey got the centre bounces again, and this time was involved with a 114. It was just a midfield onslaught. Connor Buderick scored 89, which I think you'd be happy with if you grabbed him, but he didn't get the halfback role that I kind of thought he would, and it looked like he had last week when Rioli went off injured. But he still scored well playing forward. I guess the concern would be in games where they don't dominate, what's he going to put up as a small forward? Will Powell got the halfback role, it seemed. He scored 89 as well. I'd be a little bit more confident on Powell scoring moving forward than Buderick, only if he's in that role, because Powell's been hot and cold as well. And then lastly, Levi Ashcroft. He scored a 48, not a big one for him, but just worth noting that was his first exposure to centre bounces for the season. First time he's been in there, so good to see. Hopefully he gets a bit more of it in the coming weeks. Saturday Arvo, we had the derby between Freo and West Coast, and I didn't get to catch this one, but it looked like West Coast were pretty competitive in that first half anyway, and then the Dockers kicked away. Interesting game for Freo in terms of fantasy. They didn't have a ton. No one scored 100. And that, I wouldn't imagine that would be the case too many times against West Coast this year. So that was a bit interesting. The top scorer was Hayden Young with a 98, which is a big score in just 57% time on ground. 3 goals helped that. So he was the starting sub in his return last week. This week he started, but with the game wrapped up, they subbed him in the last quarter. So looking forward to seeing him play 4 quarters and see what sort of scores he can put up, because his points for time on ground has been pretty big for the whole season when he's played. For West Coast, Ryan Marrick, he scored 69, but he returned to that fruitful half-back role. He took 8 kick-ins after, I think there was only one game he'd had kick-ins for quite some time. So not sure what's caused the change there, but anyone who still has Marrick sitting in their forward line will be hoping that he continues in that role. And Harley Reid, he scored a 52. He had an interesting day, and I have him in one of my team's keeper sides, and I was really excited. I thought I could trust him on field, and he had the back-to-back tons, a few 90s in the lead up, and you still could put him on field, but yeah, it was pretty frustrating because I had other guys on the bench that would have performed better, and he was on 10 or something at half time, and it's the same problem he's had all season. I mean, one, he was tagged by O'Meara. Pretty hard in your second year to be tagged all the time. It's those bloody frees against. Another 6 frees against in this game. And he's got, for the season, he's given away 60 free kicks, average of 3 a game. And the next highest is Rowan Marshall with 48. So he's miles ahead. So what's that, average of 3? So he's pretty much starting games at -9 and building from there based on that. Not ideal. But and he's hurt his ankle too, so it seems like he's probably done for the year, which could be a good thing for him. Have a rest, reboot, and go again next year, hopefully playing for the Eagles. North and Geelong was one of 2 games on Saturday night. Pretty disappointing from the Kangaroos. It was a 100-point plus drubbing at the hands of the Cats. A couple of North guys, though, worth mentioning. Bryn Teakle, who is the stand-in ruck for Tristan Sherry, who's got one more game after this week to serve that suspension. He scored 81, and it's another good score, but he actually won hit-outs this week. He got 29 hit-outs, which was the most on the field out of all the rucks. And last week, if you recall, he scored a 95, but I think he only got 4 or 5 hit-outs. So pretty good 3-week play if you grabbed him when Cherry went out. And, looking forward to seeing one more game from him. And then it'll be interesting to see what North do. Is he just straight out for Cherry, or do they, look at him in a forward role and play the 2 rucks? And then the other guy, Finn O'Sullivan, he scored a 66. And like Ashcroft, saw centre bounces for the first time this week. In fact, there's another player in the next game who had that too. So there's been a few of these kids getting centre bounces for the first time, which is great. For the Cats, well, they had a lot of stars. None shone brighter than Jeremy Cameron, who put up a 157 thanks to a lazy 11 goals. And, pretty big stuff. It's not often we see the double-digit goals. And 11 was one short of the record at Marvel, which is 12, held by West Coast Mark Lacroix. Look, Cameron was on Logue for big parts, but I think just with the way this game was going, it didn't matter. It didn't matter who he was playing on. Could have been, peak Stephen Silvani in the 90s. He still would have kicked a bag. It's just how much the Cats were flying. Brian Myers put up 98, and he's just interesting me because his centre bounce attendances have continued for another week, and he was actually at 50% of them this week, Myers, which is not it's not really what we've seen from him in the past. Hasn't necessarily helped his scoring. His scoring's been great, without it. Just interested to see what they're doing there with Myers, and maybe he becomes much more relevant and gets the respect he deserves in fantasy next season if he's a midfielder / forward. The other Saturday night game was another blowout, and it was a bloody good one from where I was sitting with my Crows, putting Port Adelaide to the sword in Ken Hinckley's last showdown. It was a huge win in the wet, and it was wet. If you didn't watch this, do yourself a favour, find some footage of that second or third quarter when the rain was just, I don't know, I can't remember seeing rain like that heavy in a game, in an AFL game in a very long time, which certainly didn't help Port Adelaide's chances of getting back into it. For the Crows, Dan Curtin continues his brilliant run with a 97. And this is really interesting for Curtin. His first half he was quiet, and then in the second half he went on the ball and got his first taste of centre bounces. He had a lot of them too. And then he had 16 touches and 6 tackles in the second half. And I think it's going to be something we see more of for Curtin. I think the size of him, he's great on the wing, he's great forward, but having a guy that size around the ball at the stoppage, I think he's going to do a bit more of that and just become an all-round, just an all-round beast. Wayne Miller put up another ton. That's 3 of his last 4 games have all been tons. And it's great to see for a guy who's been so riddled by injury that he's getting through this season and really performing. It's just that his scores, those big scores, seem to line up with when the Crows have big wins, and then in the tighter games he doesn't get as much of it. So that's something to consider. But it's great watching him. It's good to see him playing good footy again. For Port Adelaide, it was a pretty dirty night. Miles Bergman had an interesting game. He scored 39, which is not ideal. He started the game at the centre bounce, won the first clearance, and then kicked it 40, 50 metres the wrong way, straight to Fogarty, who took a chest mark. It was a very weird start to the game, but it kind of, set the scene for a strange night for him. And I think this is the issue with Bergman. I think they need to settle him in one spot. Like, it's okay to be a swingman, a Mr. Fix-It. He can play on the ball, tag someone, then goes to half-back, and that's all fine, but I don't know, this was just a weird game. He was tagging Dawson, but then later he was just playing key defender on Taylor Walker, just all over the shop. I just think Port need to, and maybe Josh Carr will do that when he steps in, Just say, nah, you're a midfielder, or no, you're this, and just stick them in the one spot. And then you've got the flexibility to make moves during game, but it was just a weird one on Saturday night, watching him all over the place. And then Jordan Sweet put up a 91, and he just deserves a little bit of credit. Well, he deserves a lot of credit for re-establishing himself as the number one ruck at Port Adelaide. I know he was a bit poor earlier in the year, lost his spot briefly, but I think if you've got him, I think you can be pretty confident in his job security and his scoring potential. He put up 91 in this game against Riley O'Brien, who can be quite restrictive. He scored a huge 132 last week against Lloyd Meek. There was a 71 the week before against West Coast, and then a 97 against Brisbane, who can be tricky as well. So I think he's going to be a pretty handy scorer moving forward. On to Sunday, where we had the two games for some reason that were overlapping for some reason. I'm not going to talk about the fixture. Richmond had a crack from what I could see. I didn't watch much of this. I had it on a little bit in the second quarter, and scores were pretty close, and Richmond were really having a go. I reckon their fans would be pretty pleased with what they saw, but Collingwood, just too good and got the win. For Richmond, Tyler Sonsie is someone I can't quite... I can't claim to know what's going on or know a lot about him, but he put up a 111 to back up his 80 last week with so it's a solid ton. He took 10 marks, had plenty of the footy. I think he's just playing half forward and roaming up the ground, but 80 and 111, they're pretty good scores, so we'll be watching him closely to see if this is just a bit of a hot run for him, or is he going to be an accumulator for us. For Collingwood, Tom Mitchell was back, and he also scored 111. Now, he was rested last week, and I say rested like that because it just seemed odd that he was going to be out. He'd only just played a couple of games, and I wondered if it was issues about having him and Ned Long in that same midfield. But no concerns in this game. The two of them were there together. They both played well. They both scored well. And I think Tom Mitchell will continue to play. And then Nick Dacos, he was the difference, I reckon. He's put up a 146, playing a mix of on the ball and half back. And it just feels like he was the difference in this game. 42 touches, kicked 3 goals, probably another 3 Brownlow votes. And he's looking ominous for the award this year. All right, on to the final game of the round, and wasn't it just an absolute one to remember? St Kilda versus Melbourne at Marvel, a dead rubber in terms of two sides can't make finals. And who would have thought it would have had one of the craziest finishes we've ever seen? Thanks to this man, who yet again is the Finders Keepers Player of the Week. It's Nasiah Wanganeen-Miller with a 147. Thanks to 34 touches, 5 marks, 4 tackles, and 4 goals, including the last 2 in the last minute of the game, in just 2 absolute see it to believe it moments. The mark he took was incredible on its own, and then the craziness of the 666 infringement. Look, I don't know what else to say about this guy. He is exploding before our eyes, and it's just great to see. He's probably not someone 8-10 weeks ago I would have said, would be in the conversation for greatest player in the game at the moment. But how do you deny him? And from a fantasy perspective, he's been consistent with low tons, but now he's putting up these whoppers. Pretty incredible stuff. A little stat I found on him I thought was pretty cool. So he, not surprisingly, has taken the most running bounces in the AFL this season with 83. But the next best is all the way down on 49, and Max Holmes, who's quite the dasher himself. But that just shows you how much Wanganeen-Miller gets the pill and how much he takes the game on, taking that many bounces. What a star. Future star could be there in Max Hall. He put up a 79. He's now got a 5-round average of 87. And that's pumped up by the 120 he had a few weeks ago. But his role is evolving, and he had 33% centre bounces this week after 18% last week. So he's getting more of a midfield role whilst playing, half forward. I don't know, it's kind of like a Dylan Moore type guy. Pretty exciting if you've got him. And then lastly, for the Saints, I don't like to finish on a down note, but I can't ignore that performance from Jack Steele with a 46. What was that? Look, I know he had shoulder concerns heading into the game. We heard that, maybe he wasn't going to play. And I reckon there were a bunch of people in the salary cap formats who were going to pick him up and didn't, which would have been smart. But he was on 10 at half time, which is just crazy. The form he's been in, it's crazy. And he played almost exclusively forward in the last quarter, kicked a goal. I reckon he's a watch this week to see. We'll just see if he plays, because you have to imagine he's injured scoring like that. Now for Melbourne, it was a day to forget in the end, and I feel for their fans. You know who I feel for most, though? I feel for the Melbourne fans, because that was a gut-wrenching loss. I feel for the St Kilda fans who left Marvel Stadium at three-quarter time when they were 46 points down and missed the greatest comeback of all time. And there would have been plenty of them. On a Sunday, Arvo, get home early, beat the traffic, got work tomorrow, I'm not watching this crap. And then next minute, driving home with the radio on, and the Saints come back to win. Crazy stuff. Anyway, I was talking about Melbourne. The one thing that caught my eye was Caleb Windsor, who, he hasn't had a great season for a second year in it, and he's been in and out of the side. I think he's been the sub a bit. And something I've been calling for Melbourne is to mix up the centre bounce guys. It's just been the same crew pretty much all year, week in, week out. This week they did, but it wasn't for like a Trent Rivers, who you'd think. It was Caleb Windsor, who had 40% centre bounces, and that allowed Petrarca to play a bit more forward. Now, Windsor was very quiet, and he was subbed off in the fourth quarter, so I'm not sure how well that worked. But at least Melbourne tried something different. I'm just curious why they tried it with him. I wasn't expecting that. Give young Langford a crack in there, I reckon, or Trent Rivers, but I've talked about that many times in the past. And that was round 20, a pretty strange round, really, at the end of it. Let's talk waiver wire picks for this week. And I feel like I've said this a lot in the last few weeks, but these are getting so hard to find, find guys that are worth, using a pick on. Or if you're better off just sitting out the waivers and picking up some free agents that slip through. But let's look at the four guys I put up last week and see how I went, or see how they went. And Blake Hardwick was the first one. I talked about how he played a lot forward in the last few years, but when he plays backline, he scores well, and he kept that backline role this week, scored 80, pretty good. I think you'd be pleased with that. His ownership went from 59% last week up to 69%, so it's still pretty low, and I think you could grab him if he's there. The next guy was Beau McCreary, who was only 9% owned, but I liked his game. But he picked up an injury during the week, so he didn't play. I think you could probably drop him back to the pool safely this week and grab someone else. Teakle for North. Now, this is huge. He was at 8% owned, and he's up to 52% ownership this week, which makes sense because he was, put up the 95 last week. Anyway, he scored 81, looked pretty good again. It's a 3-week play because Cherry will be back the week after next, but who knows? He could turn into something else. But that forward status is very handy. And then the last one was Connor Buderick, who I thought might get the Dan Rioli role at half-back. And a lot of people agreed because he was at 19% owned and he went up to 42%. Now, he did get the role, but he scored 89 playing forward. I'm not as excited about him despite the score, just with that role not being what I thought it would be. And don't drop him. I mean, you may as well have a look at him for a few more weeks, see what scores you can get out of him, but I'm just not as bullish as I was. Now, before I go into this week's, I forgot to sort of say before with the ownership numbers what I'm actually talking about. So these ownership numbers are from Keeper Fantasy platform, and the ownership numbers are for Keeper and Dynasty leagues. So it doesn't include the numbers of single season draft leagues, which I think is really cool. So you get a really good indication of, how popular a player is in the format that you like to play. So this week, let's see what I can come up with. I've got Alex Davies from Gold Coast, fairly obvious one. He's a name that I think a lot of us have heard over the years as being a guy that could be pretty good if he gets a run in that midfield. He's 33% owned in his 5th season, starved of opportunity to this point, but played midfield on the weekend, put up a ton. I think he'll be popular. Tyler Sonzi is at 35% ownership, the Richmond forward. His last 2 scores, 80 and 111, have just made me stand up and take notice, and I think there'll be others who do as well. I think he's worth grabbing to see if it's a flash in the pan or if this is going to be if he's going to be a good scorer moving forward. The other one's a bit speculative, but I don't mind it this time of year because we are getting close to, some will be starting their fantasy finals this week. But Taylor Walker for the Crows, he's 45% owned. He hasn't put up any huge scores this year, and he's a sub-risk, I guess, late in games. We've seen that. But there's a couple of fixtures coming up that I think he'll be excited about. And I know Phil Thorpe and Fogarty, they're the main guys. But the Crows have West Coast in a couple of weeks, and he's got a very nice record against them in recent years. And then the Crows finish the season away to North Melbourne in what I'm pretty sure, if all goes well, if he plays every game, will be his 300th game. I just reckon the last round of the season, away to North, 300th game, if you're in a fantasy grand final and you've got big techs, it could work out pretty well, because it did a couple of years ago. If you remember, the Crows played West Coast at the end in what was fantasy grand final week, and Tex kicked a bag and would have been very handy and would have taken a lot of coaches to the flag that week. And just lastly, his 250th game was against West Coast, and he kicked 10 that night. So I don't know. I'm not sure if he's got it in him, just the way the Crows share the ball around, the way Thilthorpe and Fogarty are playing. But I don't know. I reckon you could do worse than having Tex as a backup forward for the run home. And then the last one, Bailey Fritsch, I've talked about it before. He's still only 35% owned, which is it's just so low for a guy. He's averaging 86 in his last 3 now and plays West Coast this week. So could have a good one there as well. Now, I do like to go a little deeper and try and pick out guys with even lower ownership. If you're in a league that's super deep and finding guys off the scrap heap is pretty hard going. So let's have a look. Mitch Lewis for Hawthorn, 23% owned. He kicked 2 goals, scored 76, but he just looked impressive. He looked huge. And, there's so many of these key forwards developing this year that are becoming quite trustworthy in fantasy. I reckon he's got the potential to be that. And so does his mate, Kausha Deer, who's at 13% ownership. And it's just the same story. 2 goals, scored 74, but looked really good. And then we've got a couple of young Carlton boys I talked about at the start. Will White is at 2% ownership, had some time on a wing, looked pretty solid, I thought. And Harry O'Farrell, 2% owned. He's a key defender, but scored a ton thanks to 13 marks. So who knows? He might be better than your average key defender scoring-wise. So there are my waiver picks for the week. Good luck. I hope you get the ones you're after. And they end up staying in your side long term. That'd be pretty good. Now, there's no questions this week, but I did want to just give a quick shout out to Damien Peck at DamoPeck on X, who sent me a message during the week pretty much just saying that he's really enjoyed the podcast and well done. And, he's glad I started this thing. So really appreciate that feedback, mate. It's really nice to, it's just nice to know that, the work that I put into this podcast is, it's well received by those who are listening. So thank you kindly. Looking forward to finishing this first season of Finders Keepers strong. So no questions, but I did want to just talk about one of the keeper leagues I'm in. The league is called Coaches Keepers, and the league started up only, this is its second season, and it's me and 11 guys, 12-team league, and the 11 guys are Patreons from the Coaches Panel. So we started up a few leagues at the Coaches Panel, start of last year. And I'm just loving what this league has turned into. You got 12 guys who are so fanatical, so engaged, and it's a really competitive league in that I missed finals in the first season and then thought I'm a chance this year, and I'm pretty much anchored to the bottom of the table. It is just such a competitive league. It's good fun, and the reason I bring it up, there's a couple of reasons I bring it up. We've got our deadline approaching for trades at the end of next weekend. Oh, the end of this weekend, actually. And with my season over, I put up some short-term assets for sale to get some trades going. And I got a few, but it started this huge run of trades in our league, which I just love. Actually, one of the guys said in the group chat, you got plenty of content for the podcast this week. I'm not going to go through all the trades. I just wanted to talk about leagues that have active trades, and player movement, I guess is what I'm talking about. I mean, in this league, we've had 10 trades go through since Monday of last week, which is huge. I think before that, we'd only had a couple or 3 for the whole season. So we've just had this massive rush. And I just wondered how it starts. Is it the fact that the deadline's approaching? Is it that you see someone else do a good trade, you think, oh, I don't want to miss out, I want to get involved too, and then it just catches fire? So my question to you is this something that happens in your league? Do you find that when one trade goes through, it can sometimes open the floodgates if you haven't had trades for a while? And then the other question is, how do you see the best way to do trades? Is it just these quiet one-on-one conversations with other coaches in your league? Or do you put up a list of players in the group chat and say, hey, I'm keen to sell these guys, come at me with your best offer? I think there's arguments for and against both ways of doing it, but really interested in your thoughts. So let me know during the week. I want to hear about not necessarily the trades going through, I'm always keen to hear that, but how you see trades in your league. What gets things moving? And I can't even put my finger on what happened in ours, but it got moving and then some. So 10 trades in the last week. I'm not going to go through every single one, but I'll go through a couple of the ones that I pulled off. See if you think I've done well here. So my side is, not contending at the moment. I had a lot of injuries and form issues. I'm pretty happy with the core of my midfield though. So I was pretty happy to let Clayton Oliver go. I haven't loved his last 2 seasons, obviously. And someone came up to me with a trade offer for Clayton Oliver, offering me Sam Lawler, which really pricked my ears up because I'm pretty happy with what I've seen from Lawler this year. I obviously don't need him now because I'm not playing finals. And I just thought this is a pretty good offer here. Oliver for Lawler as a straight swap. I just thought, how can I like to sweeten it. So I ended up getting a pick swap in there. I picked up his 6th round pick and he grabbed my 9th round. Much of a muchness. But essentially it's Oliver for Lawler. Now on paper it's probably a bit lopsided with Lawler not likely to be a consistent scorer for some time, if at all. I'm confident he'll be a slow burn, a bit like a Horn Francis type, who eventually will be a good scorer, but it'll be a few years. But I'm happy to take that and let Oliver go, and hopefully Oliver finds a new lease on life and can perform for this coach that I've traded him to. But Lawler, I'm pretty excited about that. I think it's a good deal for me. I've still got some pretty good names in that midfield that can cover the loss of Oliver. Guys like Matty Rowell, Ed Richards, Josh Ward, Sam Walsh, Harvey Langford I got this year. He's looking pretty good. So I think the midfield's in good shape, and I was all right with saying goodbye to Clary. And then the other trade I did was letting Dan Houston go, along with a 7th round pick to a contender, and getting Josh Weddle and a 3rd round pick back. I mean, Houston's interesting. I think it's a great time to buy Dan Houston. His value will be quite low. He's been, well, let's be honest, he's been pretty putrid this year in a fantasy sense for the Pies. So he's a really good buy low guy, and for me, I'm happy to say goodbye to him. He's 28, 29, and I'm really big on Josh Weddle, really big on him. So grabbing a 3rd round pick with it, I think it's pretty good business again, and hopefully Houston can turn it around for the guy I traded him to and help him in finals. Now I'll go through one more of the trades that went through, and this was a really big one. So someone sent Jeremy Cameron, Jake Lloyd, 3rd round, 4th round picks, and in return got Tom De Koning, 2nd round pick, and a 6th round pick. So the pick swaps are, they're a big part of it, but let's just look at the players. Jeremy Cameron, Jake Lloyd for Tom De Koning. Really smart to target De Koning. I think if you're in a league and Tom De Koning's there and they have another ruck, I reckon go hard at him because his value's low. But I'm really bullish that, it's looking more likely that he gets to St Kilda. But I'm really bullish on De Koning becoming the best ruck in the game still. So if you can get him for a low price, absolutely go for it. And then, the guy who gave him up, his other ruck is Darcy Cameron, which is pretty solid for now. But it's pretty game to let De Koning go. But he's right in the premiership race, and he's added Jeremy Cameron and Jake Lloyd. And talk about your instant reward with Jezza, 11 goals and a 157 on debut for him. And then Jake Lloyd put up a 99 as well. So, down the track, I reckon he'll regret letting De Koning go. But if it gets him a premiership this year, we're playing for flags. And that is sometimes really all that matters. All right, I reckon that's it for the trade talk. I could go through the rest of them. I do like doing it, but I will maybe save them for another week. Or who knows, we might get more this week in the deadline week. Now, something about this league that I'm in, Coaches Keepers. It's a 12-team league, very engaged, very competitive players in there. But unfortunately, one of our coaches is departing. I'm not sure exactly what the reason is, but it just sounds like life's just got in the way and he's a little bit too busy to be giving the team and the league the energy and effort required. So he's happy to pass on the reins, which means our league needs a new coach. And I thought, in terms of replacing this guy, why not look to the Finders Keepers crowd and see if there's any listeners who might want to join the league. So it's a 12-team league, 30-player squad. We keep 15 year on year, but that includes 3 rookies. And the side that you'd be taking over has pick 1 in the draft next year. So if this is something you might be interested in, stay tuned to Finders Keepers. The next couple of weeks, I'm going to start to announce more details about how the competition's going to run, and make sure you're following at FindKeepAFL on X, the Finders Keepers X page, so you don't miss out on any of the details regarding the opportunity to join Coaches Keepers. a keeper league that I'm in. And with that, I think I will wrap up this week's edition of Finders Keepers as we turn our attention to round 21, where some leagues will be starting their finals and others, it's the final round to qualify. Thanks for listening to this week's episode. I'll be back next week on Tuesday to have a look back at round 21 and all that went down. Good luck for this week. I hope you get all the waiver picks you desire, and I hope you qualify for finals. Or if you're in finals, I hope you get a win first up and make that one step closer to Premiership glory. So I'll catch you next week. Thanks for listening. But in the meantime, I'm Jordox. This has been Finders Keepers. And until next time, keep on keeping on.